Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they're using their gifts and talents to help others. How are they making a positive contribution to humanity? In that, I'm always looking for someone who is doing something extraordinarily well or doing extraordinary things. And I invite someone here twice per week to share their stories because I believe that when we share our stories, it best connects us as human beings. I believe that when we speak of how successful we are and how we overcome our challenges and how often we get up, I think in a way we prepare the way for those who are struggling with their ideas or struggling with their purpose to attempt it. And so I'm always encouraging people to commit to their ideas, not so that when they're successful they can bask in the glory. Of course, with success comes a lot of accolades, a lot of rewards, and one should indulge and should enjoy. But what I like to say is that I believe that when we are successful, it is not only for us. Because I believe that our successes are like beacons of light that should illuminate paths, should shine upon others to show them where their switches are, to remind others that they too can. And it's one of the reasons why I come here every week, regardless of what is happening around me. I brave it and I come here, not to prove anything to myself, but to demonstrate to those who might be looking on, someone who might be hesitant to pursue a particular idea, someone who might be struggling with fear and anxiety, someone who's thinking that their limitations are keeping them back, someone who's thinking that they can't because of where they are or the limited resources. I do this so that I can show those people they too can. With all the limitations, with all the challenges, you too can, whatever it is. And a little bit about ideas. I think that when you receive an idea, you have an idea, it is so important to pursue that idea, to commit to it with all that you have, regardless of who laughs or who laughs or who mocks you. That is not what is important. We are here tonight in this particular medium using this amalgamation of technologies because the various people who either discovered, invented them, or put them together, had an idea once. And I am quite certain, I'm confident that many of their ideas were laughed at, they were mocked and ridiculed. But because of their persistence, because of their determination, we can use this medium here tonight. There's so many unsung heroes among us, and I love to invite our unsung heroes just to show that if you think you cannot, here is someone who might have less than you, able to do it in spite of. And so, when you have an idea, commit to this idea, not just for you, but for the rest of us. I'm going to take a short break. Inconvenience and the technical difficulties, we are all at mercy of technology these days, and it's not perfect, but we have to keep trying. That's important. Desiree, I'm trying to remember where where we left off, but you were
Sure.
telling us about
And
Kitty.
kind of walks on the seawalls.
Yes.
Yeah, saying what I liked about being 16 years old. And I was sharing my lovely walks on the seawalls. Seawalls was a beautiful place to be. Of course, we didn't have as many overtopping as we do now, out of the water coming over. So it's no longer a safe place like it used to be. I miss that.
Wow. And who would you say has had the greatest influence on you as a child growing up?
I can't I've been asked this question before, and I can't in my mind think of anyone who had an influence on me at that time. You know, I my mother and father left me when I was 6 years old, and I grew up with a family friend, and I don't remember looking at anyone and saying that when I grow, I want to be like that someone. Because I was angry and unhappy, all I thought about was that one day I was going to be able to make decisions for myself. And I think that is what kept me going. I never could remember as I sit here today anyone who I thought was a great influence on my life when I was 16 years old. I can talk about when I was 30 and you know, but I can't remember anyone at 16 years old who I can say had an influence on me that I wanted to be like when I grew up.
Right. And so, who is Desiree Edghill, the woman, actress, writer, and producer, compared to the activist?
She's a mother. I have mothered so many children who are not my biological children from the organization that I run, the youth members. I have so many children that even people who are not children anymore still call me Auntie Desiree. I'm a counselor. From the time I knew myself, I was doing counseling. Of course, that time I didn't know it was counseling. Now I know that it is. But I'm always counseling, always giving cheer to someone, or always comforting. And so that's who I am. And I love to work with the youth. I think the youth is our future. And I wondered when I'm gone, there would be a lot of young people who would be saying, "Do you remember Desiree Edghill? She was my mentor." And that for me means a lot. And so that's who I am. I'm a comforter, I'm a counselor, I'm a supporter, I'm a mother to many.
Justice for all and human rights agenda. Why have you taken up this cause, and what is the trigger that led you down this path?
When I started doing HIV work, I started in 1992. That was over 20 years ago. One of my bestest friend was HIV positive, and I remember when we started doing HIV work in Guyana, there was so much stigma and discrimination attached to HIV at the time that I felt the blunt of it. At that time, people didn't want to talk about HIV and AIDS, and they felt that anyone who was talking about it was themselves HIV positive. And so I had to deal with that from 20 years ago, from 1992, from the time I started with this organization. And so I always felt through the years that stigma and discrimination was the greatest barrier against stopping the spread of HIV and AIDS. And so the Justice for All and Human Rights agenda for me means quite a lot, because I think if we all, first of all, we're humans. And because we're humans, we have rights. We have the right to be. Just being a human being, we have the right. And so I think if all of us get our rights, then there would be justice. And so I always felt that stigma and discrimination was closely attached to justice for all, because if stigma and discrimination was reduced or taken away entirely, then everyone will have justice. We would not be discriminated against. We would not be fearful. We would not be. We would not isolate ourselves. We would have higher self-esteem. And so, because of that stigma and discrimination, that is why justice for all and human rights really means a lot to me.
What would you say is the civil society role in the national response?
I think civil society, for me, started the HIV response in Guyana in 1999 through USAID, who brought together the first group of civil society organizations, six in all at that time, to execute the Guyana HIV/AIDS STI Youth Project under the theme "Ready Body, Is It Really Ready?" And so the first response for HIV and AIDS in Guyana started with civil society. And civil society still has a major role in the fight against the national response as we go towards looking at the national, at one response, because it is no longer, this is no longer a time for us to be doing work in our own little pockets. We all have to come together to make a difference in this national response. And civil society has always been on the ground, so grassroots, so to speak. And so we were closer to the people, reaching them, talking with them, trying to understand what is bothering them and see how best we can address them. And so because of that association, because of that relationship between people on the ground in communities, civil society still has that major role, continues to play the major role, and still has a major role to play in the fight against HIV, and when we're talking about the national response.
You know, I'll try to, I'm gonna take a leap and I'll try to bridge, to create a bridge here, only because you function within these various arenas.
Yeah.
Here with the whole the civil society's role, and also you deal with stigma, discrimination, and cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
Now, Guyana is a land of six races
Yeah.
and the mixtures,
Mm-hmm.
and you deal with cultural sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find in any way cultural insensitivity affects or sort of limits how you perform your role in your fight against HIV/AIDS, your fight against discrimination, trying to educate and inform the people about HIV/AIDS? How does that affect your role in that?
I think it affects because in Guyana, people seem to rely a lot on what people think of them more than who we are, or what kind of contributions we can make. And if people are really sensitive about stuff, people don't want to address them.
Hmm.
And, and so it does make things difficult. It makes you want to move to the place where you have to try to understand the different cultures and what they're sensitive about. And there was some rejection from some cultures saying, oh, we don't want to address this. Like, for instance, this is not a we thing, this is a you thing. And so we don't want to talk about it. I think in the beginning it was harder because people not wanting to listen, not wanting to be a part of. But I think when people started to realize that there were people from their same cultures, people who are as sensitive as they are, coming down with HIV and AIDS, or if not them themselves, their friends or someone that they knew in their community started coming down, then I think people started to come a little closer to understanding that this fight is a fight for all of us. And AIDS, HIV and AIDS does not discriminate. And you don't have to be a particular race or a particular culture in order to get HIV. HIV is no respecter of persons. And I think it took a little while for us to get there, but I think people are more there now in understanding that anyone, doesn't matter who you are, what race you are, what religious persuasion you are, what sexual orientation you are, we all can contract HIV and AIDS and be affected by it.
When you think of your fight, or the fight, to make it more broad and general, who would you say you're fighting for, and why is it worth fighting for them?
I would say that I'm fighting for life, fighting for people to be alive. Most of my work is prevention work. This is not to say that I have not done care and support, but most of the work that I do is in prevention. I want people to prevent people from contracting HIV. There's no cure for HIV. There's no cure for AIDS. And you don't want people to go to the place where you have to live the rest of your life on medication. And medication will not take you forever. There's going to come a time when your body's going to break down and can fight no more. And so I'm fighting for life. I'm fighting for our young generation, especially, or else we'll have no future. I'm
Hmm.
fighting for our future. I'm fighting for the next generation. If we don't fight now, then we're going to have a generation gap. So my fight is for the future. Fight for the next generation. Fight that the people who are young now can become who I am today.
When we talk about fighting for, or fighting, usually it's because there are obstacles,
Yeah.
many obstacles, many challenges, usually an uphill battle. Saying that, with all the challenges you have, what what keeps you going? What makes you get up every day and continue this fight and take the next step? What is it?
In in 19 in 2000, when I lost my very dear friend Keith Andres O'Brien from this dreaded disease, he made me promise him that I would continue this fight. This is a fight that he started in 1992. He was diagnosed in 1989 and started this fight, brought us together and started this fight in 1992. And when he died in 2000, at that time we did not have medication, or we were not we are today in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And he made me promise that I would stay with this until hopefully we find a cure. And I have seen quite a few of my friends in the arts pass as a result of AIDS-related illnesses. And it's something that I don't want to see anymore. And so my fight is to ensure that that doesn't happen. I might not be able to save all, but every one that I save means a lot to me. And so that is what keeps me going. That promise that I made so many years ago, that I would stay in this fight, that I would make a difference. And because I've seen Guyana move from being the second highest in the Caribbean to the seventh highest, that's what keeps me going. You know that all is not lost, that we have moved from being number 2 to being number 7.
What do you think is responsible for that shift?
I think Guyana started the response early. A lot of our Caribbean counterpart countries thrive on tourism. And so I think people did not want the tourists to feel that the HIV was present in their countries. And so people were denying that it was present. I remember when Barbados brought up their first statistics, they said that they had so many people who were HIV positive, but the majority of those people were Guyanese. What they did not say was that the people who went to get tested were Guyanese.
Oh.
And so then at a time when people were not in the other parts of the Caribbean were interested in HIV and AIDS, Minister.
So, Desiree, you're saying about HIV/AIDS before, but I asked you about the different hats you're wearing.
Okay.
As trainer of trainers for stigma, discrimination, culture sensitivity, and human rights, what systems are in place to tackle stigma and discrimination, especially in healthcare settings?
Well, we recently had an issue in one of our healthcare settings in Ghana where there was an altercation between a patient and, well, a client, someone who went in and one of the healthcare providers. And out of that altercation came the decision to put together what is called a stigma and discrimination policy and a code of ethics for healthcare settings. Persons complain that they face a lot of stigma and discrimination in healthcare settings. You know how we are, love a juicy gossip, curiosity, somebody comes in and you know them and you're like, oh my God, guess who? And so the government, through the National AIDS Program, Ministry of Health, and the GHAR project, which is under the PEPFAR project, the Ghana HIV/AIDS Reduction and Prevention Project at the time, came together and with the community, the key affected population, and put together a stigma and discrimination policy, a code of ethics. And these were all placed in healthcare settings. I remember the Minister of Health at the time, Dr. Ramsamy, who did the opening, said he was going to take it so far that if healthcare settings did not have this stigma and discrimination policy and this code of ethics displayed where people who access the services can see it, then they would not be granted their license. And it went for both private and public healthcare settings, along with a suggestion box. And so even though people might have those code of ethics and stigma and discrimination policies placed on their walls, there might still be stigma and discrimination from among the service providers. And so they placed a suggestion box. And so if you did face stigma and discrimination, you can write it and drop it into the box. Another important thing that they did was to couple the healthcare settings with civil society organizations, NGOs, CSOs, and that kind of thing. So that if there were issues that they were not comfortable in dealing with in the healthcare settings, that we can then go in and help to sort out whatever that issue was. Our organization, Artists in Direct Support, was coupled with the Campbellville and the Kitty Health Clinics. And so I went in there and did stigma and discrimination sessions with the healthcare providers. And when I say healthcare providers, I mean everyone. So not because a security guard is outside it, he's not the first person that someone sees when they go in there, it's a security guard. And even the security guards, even the cleaners were all included in those stigma and discrimination sessions that we would hold at the healthcare settings. And it is our duty to do follow-up sessions to send people to access the services to ensure that they were following the stigma and discrimination policy and the code of ethics. And so that's a big step in the fight against stigma and discrimination in the healthcare settings.
And then sitting as the vice chair to the Minister of Health on the country coordinating mechanism CCM and the Global Fund in Guyana. First, please tell us what is CCM and then what are some things you come in contact with in that capacity that are not readily obvious to the public?
Okay, so first of all, let me say that the Minister of Health, Dr. Ram Sami, who was the then Minister of Health, was the chair of the CCM, but now he's the Minister of Agriculture, but he's still the chair of the CCM. So he's now sitting in the CCM in his capacity as Minister of Agriculture and not Minister of Health as he was before. So let me first clear that up. And I'm the vice chair. So the country coordinating mechanism, it's a voluntary body that is put together with representatives from government and civil society. For instance, I sit there representing the NGO constituency. So I don't sit there representing my organization, which is Artists in Direct Support. I sit representing the NGO constituency, all the NGOs in Guyana. Mm-hmm. Of course, we had a national consultation where I was voted in and I was nominated and they had voting and that kind of thing for me to sit there. The vice chair, I was nominated vice chair, voted for at the CCM level. That was not done at my constituency level. And so the CCM is a body that the Global Fund stipulates a country has to have that body that manages and oversees the funds coming from the Global Fund for country. And so the Global Fund funds most of Guyana's HIV response, government's HIV response, and now they're going to be funding a lot of civil society's response to the fight against HIV and AIDS. A lot of the treatment that is being given free of charge in Guyana comes from funding from the Global Fund. Of course, all of that is changing now as we move toward country ownership. And so that's our function at the CCM level. We look at all and it's three diseases. It's HIV, it's tuberculosis, and malaria. Those are the three diseases that the Global Fund funds in country. And so all the managers of those programs have to report to the country coordinating mechanism how they're going, if they're reaching their targets, and if they're not, why are they not reaching it? If the money is being spent, where it's supposed to spend, and report it to the CCM. And we make decisions. We make decisions on Guyana's proposal, what Guyana's proposal should look like, what should go in it. And we make decisions on how Guyana's money is spent and where it goes, and ensure that it goes the same way, where it was approved to go. We also do what is called site visits, where we go to the malaria in the different regions of Guyana. We go to the different sites where they're doing the malaria program and where they do the TB program and the HIV program, and check to see if it's functioning effectively, and if people in the regions have any issues. So those are our functions on the CCM. We have quarterly meetings, but we also have special meetings if there are issues that we need to address.
I am curious about something, especially the funding part of it. Mm-hmm. Is there a pot where all the monies, all the fundings go into and then it's distributed, or do you have monies or funding specifically for particular initiatives or issues? And
Guyana has to send in their proposal.
Okay.
We have what is called a PR. The PR is a principal recipient, and for Guyana, the principal recipient is the Ministry of Health, run by the PS, the Permanent Secretary. And then we have sub-recipients. So the principal recipient gets the money, and then it is dispersed to sub-recipients and managers of the fund. So they don't do implementation. What they do is manage the funds, which the SSR, which is the sub-recipients, do the execution. That's like us, our executing body, civil society organizations, the National AIDS Program, and that kind of thing. So it does go into one pot, but do understand that before it goes into that pot, that proposal for where the money will go has to be approved by the Global Fund, on which that is supervised by the country coordinating mechanism.
Oh, so the money goes to the ministry.
Yes,
the ministry is the receiving body. Principal receiving body, and then it is given according to what was proposed.
People have to apply to be sub-recipients and qualify according to the Global Fund's requirements. Mm-hmm. And so we have 3 sub-recipients, and then they have sub-recipients depending on how much work they need to do and what is the spread of the work, because we have subrecipient working in the rural and we have subrecipient working in the coastal.
So these principles and policies were established by who? The funding
Agency
agencies,
Global Fund,
the global.
yes.
Okay, okay, I
And this
see.
has evolved over the years because when we started, they were not so stringent. But the money diminishes, then the rules are getting harder. It's getting harder for you to access. Guyana has been lucky. We have been receiving money from the inception since the Global Fund started funding countries. And so we have been one of the countries that have been lucky to get continued funding from the Global Fund.
Well, what are some plans for sustainability as external funding diminishes?
Well, there's a lot of talk now of sustainability and country ownership. I think one of the issues that I find, and I've been hearing it recently, is that I think sustainability has to be spoken of at the inception. At the inception, we were just given the money. There was lots of money, and we were just giving it. We were just going ahead doing the work and not thinking about sustainability, thinking that the money would always be there. So I think one mistake that we made was not looking at sustainability from the inception. And then over 5 years ago, we started hearing this talk about sustainability and what is called cost sharing. Cost sharing in terms of if they're giving you 95% or 93% of the funding, you got to find 7%. So it's a way of moving you toward trying to fund your own project by saying, okay, you want to do this whole thing, but you got to put some of the money. It doesn't matter where you get it from, but you just got to get it and put it there. Um, it we, but I think there is a little mix up between sustainability and self-sufficiency. Because sustainability really speaks to trying to continue doing the work that you're doing, but trying to do more raising of your funds, seeing how you can get some money, some funding from government, and also some funding from external funders. Sustain. Self-sufficiency is turning your NGO into a business, which we were. That's not what we started. That's not what we were created to do. And so that's something we have to do a lot of clearing up of, because I think when people are talking to us about sustainability, they're more speaking self-sufficiency than sustainability. Because I want to say that some of the projects that we are doing, we're going to need external funding in order to continue to, especially the key affected population, in order to continue to address that population, we're going to need external funding. And so as we move toward sustainability and country ownership, people seem to think that when you speak country ownership, you're speaking government ownership. But country ownership does not speak to government ownership. Country ownership speaks to all of us coming together for that one response, that one national response that we spoke about earlier. So it has to be civil society, it has to be government, all the players coming together. And so it's important that we understand that is what country ownership means, because we don't want to do is get mixed up in all the politics, and then people who are suffering continue to suffer at the end of the day. And so we now have to, like we have started to do, look at creative ways of how we're going to sustain our programs. But there's one thing that you need to understand is that the funders stipulates who they want us to address. If you depend on funding, then you have to do what we say, who's on the piper call the tune, what's the thing? Who pays the piper calls the tune, kind of thing. And so it is important to understand that a lot of us have our own priorities. And so if we're going to start funding our own programs, then it stands to reason that there are some people who are going to move away from what the funders wanted you to do and move toward what you wanted to do. Because for us, really, we started working with youth, and that is my passion, to work. And so I'm starting to raise some funds. We're artists and direct support, so our work really is in the arts. And so we started to look at creative ways of raising funds to continue to do work with the youth, because we're not being funded to do work with the youth generally, in and out of school youth. And so all of us, we're going to, this year was our most challenging fiscal year, because the PEPFAR program slashed their funding by 50%. You were sharing the cost of 7% in the last fiscal year, which was a year ago. And then this year, when the project, when we were brought together to do this project, we were told we have to cut our budget by 50%. And so that was a kind of a shake-up, you know.
Hmm.
But it was telling you, you know, we were telling you since 5 years ago that, you know, sustainability is where we're going to go. But I was expecting a gradual move toward that place.
Hmm.
But having to cut 50% in 1 year, it was a challenge for us. I had to make some really, really crucial and harsh decisions, especially where staff is concerned. You know, to send people off, to put some people on part time and that kind of thing. But we have now to look at, not for us, there was one funding that was funding our organization. We have to now look at pockets of funding. So you have to look at, if you have need 5 different funders to fund for your whole project, and then
Gotcha.
you put your staff on a percentage of each.
In the chat room, WP asked, "Is medication for AIDS, HIV patients more readily available now?"
Yes, medication for persons living with HIV and AIDS is more readily available. It is more readily. It had to be more readily available because we started treating persons earlier. When we started, we were treating persons by clinical analysis because we didn't have so much of viral load testing and all of that. We just look and see what you have on your skin, and you have to be triple asymptomatic, meaning you have to have show 3 symptoms before we started getting treatment. Now we're not there. To check your blood count, to see where you are, and then if it's 350, you go on your treatment. So we have more treatment that are readily available. We have more sites that are doing treatment. Not all the sites in all of the regions are doing treatment, but more sites in more regions are doing treatment. So the distribution of treatment is wider than it was when we started.
Hmm.
We in Guyana, we only really have first line and second line treatment. We don't have a lot of people who are on third line, even though there are some, but it's not a lot. Most of our people are on first line. Then we have some on second line treatment. But treatment is more readily available. That is why we had to work towards curbing stigma and discrimination, because that was one of the barriers that was preventing people from going to access the treatment, even though it was readily available. But more people are access in it now.
I wanna come back to a question about self-sufficiency, because that intrigues me. But I want to ask you this question though. With the focus now on the key affected population caps,
Mhm.
which include men who have sex with men, MSM, and sex workers, how difficult it is to roll out a program for them, knowing that there are laws against homosexuality and, and prostitution.
Well, that has been one of our challenges since we started working with the key for affected population. First, they were called MARPs, most at risk population. But because we were all most at risk, depending on our behavior,
Hmm.
they're now termed the key affected population. And youth fall into that category as well. And also loggers and miners, because those are people who spend a lot of time away from home. And because prostitution goes on in the interior regions and closer to the mining camps, it is likely that people can put themselves at risk. And so, but coming back to the laws against prostitution and homosexuality, it is a barrier to some extent because it is there, so it can be used, can rear its ugly head at any time and used to the suitability of anyone who wants to make it an issue. But I think even though there are laws against homosexuality and prostitution, even the government's response addresses programs that address men who have sex with men and commercial sex workers. And so even though the law exists, it's not stringent. And I'm saying that to say that you don't see a gay man and you're going to pick him up and lock him up. There are some cases where police have harassed men who have sex with men and prostitutes on the road. But we have a gay pageant in Guyana, the Gay Glory pageant. No police closes it down. Then we have our Mashamani celebrations. We have the people from the Sex Worker Coalition. They're involved in the Mashamani on the streets, tramping like everyone else. Nobody closes it down. And so even though it is there and it does exist, I do not think it is enforced to that extent.
Hmm.
But I think there is some discomfort in the fact that it is there and that it can be used at any time. But I'm saying this, I want to say that the same people who have this law are doing work through the Ministry of Health National AIDS Program with the key affected population. Uh,
Let's.
but I think most of their response for that community comes from civil society because there are a lot of members of that community who are involved in work in civil society.
If you can, in a few seconds, give us the various bodies, including civil society, um, I think it's CCM and so on. Can you connect the dots? How many of them exist, and who are they? Can you like give us a brief, not a description, but tell us who they are so we can connect the dots?
Okay, so we have the government's response through
Ah,
the National AIDS Program, Ministry of Health, the government's response. I also want to say that we don't separate it like we used to before. So it's one national response, it's one national HIV program, one national monitoring and evaluation plan. So we all come together. There's what is called the HI Vision 2020, HIVISION 2020. So Guyana has a plan, and that plan together involved civil society, and civil society is very wide. So we got the business community, we got the religious community, we got the grassroots organizations, which are the NGOs, we got the media, we got the government, and we got community organizations. And so all of those people came together to work on this national HI Vision 2020, which is Guyana's HIV plan for the up to the year 2020. So all of those people use funding from different places. Now we don't have the World Bank funding anymore, but we're still benefiting from the PEPFAR funding, from the Global Fund funding, and we still have other funders like UNICEF, who is doing work in school, because the HFLE program, the Health and Family Life Education Program, which is the HIV program, part of it is the HIV program for in-school youth that is being managed by the Ministry of Health and executed by teachers who are trained to execute that HFLE program in schools. So we have that in school youth. We have a Ghana national HIV/AIDS workplace policy that all workplaces can use to develop HIV programs in the workplace. And so the Ministry of Labor has taken ownership of the workplace programs. And so we have those, and then we have Ministry of Health taking charge of the HIV program. Then we have that TB program, because in Guyana, a high percentage of persons who contracts who were tested and positive for TB were found to be HIV positive, and high percent of persons who were tested HIV positive were found to have TB. So those two, we're looking at HIV and TB co-infection right now, is something that we have to start addressing them together because of that statistic. And so all of those players come together, but we all execute this HI Vision 2020, which takes us up to the year 2020.
Are there overlaps with these various institutions, these various
Because
bodies?
it's one national program, before we had a lot of overlapping happening, but now all of us, civil society or otherwise, have to report to the national program. That's the National AIDS Program headed by Dr. Shanti Singh. All of us have to send monthly reports. Let me say it differently. All of us are required, or all of us are asked to send our reports to the national program every month so that they could know what we are doing, and so that they too can do their planning. Because if we don't know what each other is doing, then we'd all be planning to do the same things, and that would cause people to be left out of this response. So I can't say, as I sit here today, that everyone sends their reports to the national program every month. I know we do. We could work closely with the national program. It's important that we do, because as we move toward country ownership, we're going to be leading heavily on Ministry of Health and the National AIDS Program and what they're doing, and be a part of that program. And so even though there might still be some overlapping, and I think work is being done right now on trying to get rid of that overlapping by having people collaborate with each other in the work that they do, rather than you come and do this and I come and do this. If you're working on region and I'm coming to do something in that region, I will collaborate with you so that you wouldn't have a lot of overlapping. So there's not a lot of it happening now. It still is there, but it's a work in
Is it,
progress.
the different bodies not coordinate, but the different bodies communicate regularly with each other to find out what's going on? Is there like a central
Well,
Um,
there are quarterly meetings, especially for the key affected population, because most of the funding funder stipulates that it has to go to the key affected population, and I want to explain why that is, because only yesterday someone was saying to me, "There's what is all this talk about key affected population? We are affected. All of us are affected, and so we have to ensure that people understand that our virus, the HIV virus, is concentrated in those populations, meaning the highest prevalence is among those populations. And because the highest prevalence of HIV is concentrated among those populations, then that is hence the addressing of those populations. And so, and that came from Guyana's report. And so the funders got and they said, okay, if this disease is concentrated in those populations, then we need to do work with those populations. However, it is important to know that in dealing with the key affected populations, men who have sex with men and sex workers, I think men are left out of that equations. And for me, that is a very important thing. You can't talk about men who have sex with men and commercial sex workers and not talk about men. Because it is men who go with men who have sex with men and men who go with commercial sex workers. And so for me, I think we need to do a response with men. Having said that, I think we are working kind of together to ensure that we all reach the same population, but with different messages, because we all can't carry the same messages. So now we're doing what is called a BSS, a behavioral surveillance survey, to check to see if we can get how many of them, how many of the key population, because we don't have a count, to see what their needs are, what do we need to address with them in order to help them to keep themselves safe from contracting HIV.
i- if we can take a few minutes or a minute or so to address the self-sufficiency, I'm curious about that because I'm thinking when funding dries up, as we move closer to country ownership,
Uh-huh.
and you mentioned earlier you have to come up with some creative ways of generating funds.
Uh-huh.
How is this going to work, being that you're NGOs? And I'm looking at it from the perspective of an NGO here in the United States. How is this going to work where you transition from an NGO to a for-profit organization?
It's
What does that look like?
it doesn't look good to me where I sit.
Uh-huh.
Like I said before, I know that I'm going to need funding to do certain work, especially, like I said, to work with the key affected population. I think our business community, we need to get our business community more on board. And I think that's something we're going to be discussing in the next week. Do a little launch to see how best we can get our business community. Our business community fund sporting events, they fund backballing, dancing, bringing artists to the country, but in order to get them to really fund an HIV project, we don't get that. And even if they do, the business community seem to be more willing to fund orphans and vulnerable children. So baby, little ones.
Right.
They're not very willing to fund other members of society. I do not know if this is because the business community knows that all this funding was available in Guyana for the response. And so they've said, well, we don't have to give you money, man. Y'all getting, they say to me, Desiree, y'all getting big money, man, and them big US money. Y'all don't want we little money, kind of thing. And so we have to work now on getting the business community to understand that this funding is diminishing, that there are a lot of natural disasters that are happening around the world where funding is going to have to go for war, and the US is not going to always be able to give us any money.
You think? Do you
Yeah.
think? Do you think there needs to be a national campaign, a messaging plan, so to speak, to educate, to inform the business community or everybody, but especially the business community, what your challenges will be in the coming years when it comes to funding, and how when last night I had a professor here, Dr. Christine Thorpe, who deals with health and human services. And one of the questions I asked her, her response stood out to me. What happens, or how does when a person gets ill, how does that affect the extended family and eventually the community? And I think one of the things that is important to bring home, and you better able to describe this than I can, is that when one person gets ill, especially with an illness that is contagious, it can affect the family, which can affect the community, which can affect the nation. And somehow or the other, there has to be some kind of a messaging bridge to explain the importance of ensuring that nobody gets left behind. Which brings me to one of our core messages here tonight is, if there's no justice, I can't remember what is this statement you made, but if there's not justice for all.
For human rights.
Exactly. But going back to the question, do you think there needs to be?
If that person's the breadwinner, if that person's the breadwinner,
Wow.
then
Yes.
you know what happens to the rest of the family. We say mother dead, family done.
Yes.
So the breadwinner or the caregiver, because more often than not women are caregivers, if that person contracts HIV and can no longer be the breadwinner and the caregiver, then that really will cause a breakdown in the family. And so, yes, I agree. There is need for a national campaign to target the business community, to help them to understand what is happening, to help them to understand that the people we're talking about are people who are important to their own businesses in order for them to be productive. These are people who are making their businesses flourish that we're talking about. And it's not it's not anyone that's different. These same people who we're talking about are people who are in those same businesses, helping them to thrive. And so it's important that we are going to have a launch in May through this is spearheaded by the new PEPFAR project, which is APC, Advancing Partners and Communities. That's the project we're executing right now, where they're going to bring us all together, all the NGOs, and have a showcase, first of all, what we do. It's important that the business community has knowledge of the skills we have and how we can contribute to their business, to the people who work with them. And then to look at everyone is in tune to WIIFM, what's in it for me. So we have to show the business community their benefits. If you put your money into the fight against HIV and AIDS, what would be your benefits? People working longer, less money for pay on sick leave because people are going to be healthy. We're getting more people on the production line working longer hours. So we have to be able to sell that for the business community. So we are working on it. We're going to have that launch in May as we speak, as you brought it up. And that is just the beginning. That is just one. And that is just a group of 7 NGOs, 7 or 8 NGOs. And so we're hoping that will be the starting point and that it will become broader. Even this Justice for All program that PANCAP has just launched is another way of getting countries to come on board in the fight against stigma and discrimination through providing human rights for all, for the dignity of all of our peoples. And if our countries in the Caribbean come together, because this is a Caribbean response, then surely our leaders can help influence the businesses to come on board in the fight against the HIV.
Desiree, from where you sit and being exposed to so much in terms of information, in terms of the reality of the situation regarding funding and the fight against injustice and HIV, the different illnesses like HIV/AIDS and so on and so forth. Are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. I have been hopeful. If I wasn't hopeful, I wouldn't be here today. I have seen where we all were in our own separate ways, in our own separate clumps, doing our own things, competing against each other, civil society not wanting to talk with government and civil society not sitting together at the table. I have seen us move from that place to us coming together to work toward one national response, one national program. And I'm not going to sit here and say to you that it's all dandy and it's all the way it's supposed to be. We still have our challenges. We still have personalities. We still have people some are better than some and some are not ready. We still have that. But I have seen the coming together, which is so, so important for this fight. the coming together of government, civil society, the religious community, people at the community level coming together and joining this fight against HIV and AIDS in Ghana. And that gives me hope. And if we continue coming here to form this one clump and we get to this place, I know we're going to be better than we are today. And so I have had hope, and I still do have hope that things will get better because now we have a different challenge. We were doing coming together with funding from external funding. Now, as we get closer, we realize that the external funding is diminishing, which is the thing that was bringing us together. Now we have to rely on our own strengths to bring us together and our own support of each other. And so when you think the fight is coming to the end, we have a different fight now that we have to deal even as we get closer together. So there is hope. I have hope. I'm going to be there in that fight as long as I can.
I want to ask you a special favor tonight.
Yeah.
To remain with us for several more minutes, only because of the glitches in the beginning of the show, and I don't want to end the show without asking you some personal questions.
Okay.
I want to explore your creative side.
Okay.
And you have written, directed, produced, and acted in many plays.
Yeah.
What is the underlying social message or social conscious message in most of your plays?
Well, since I started writing when Keith Andres Bryan died, well, I used to write little skits here and there, but I never wrote a play. But when Keith died in 2000, he gave me the storyline. He didn't give me the ending. He gave me the storyline, and he died in September, and I had to have that play ready for December. That was my first attempt at writing. It was crazy. I was caring for him, and he said, "Well, you can do it." And I said, "But I can't write the play." He said, "Yes, you can." He said, "Wait, nothing in rub off?" I said, "Well, I hope so." And then I had a personal situation in my life in that same year with my husband, where I found that my husband was being unfaithful to me. And that was the play.
Wow.
He said it will come, and it did come. I didn't expect it would come like that, but it came, and I even surprised myself that I was able to write the play. And the play was healing for me because that was the end of my marriage, but it was healing for me in that I can write the story. And while I was writing it, my husband was typing it, and we were arguing. He said, "Well, I didn't say that." And I said, "Well, this is my play, and I'm writing it. So you put that." That's what I said. And so I was able to the very first play that I wrote was my own story. And it was a real story because my husband's overseas and I'm in Ghana, and I'm going to have an unprotected sex because I had so much trust. And I was put at risk. And so it was so close to home. And after then, it was like crazy. Like I couldn't believe I could write so much. I wrote over 200 skits. I just went into this writing like if that was my passion in life. I was counseling with all these people, and I want to tell their stories. I want others to see others people's pain and learn from it and not put themselves through that and not put themselves at risk. And so I just kept writing and writing and writing. I've been writing since 2000, every year for World AIDS Day. And I deal with different issues. And the same people who I work with, I deal with issues that affect them. And then I include them in the production. So they too get to go on stage and to showcase their culture. And so even in the writing and the creative stuff that I do, it all has to do with education and how I can keep people safe from contracting HIV and AIDS. And that's what makes it beautiful for me. I'm working on a production called Mouth Open Story Jump Out.
In that arena, you're a triple threat. You're writer, director, actress.
Yeah.
First, how do you balance these many talents? And among them, which do you prefer the most?
I love directing. I love watching the craft. I love teaching the craft. I think we have a lot of people who go on stage who didn't learn the craft.
Right.
And all the people who are members of this organization that I run, I teach them the craft. And so when they go on stage, they know the craft. And so you can see these are people who know what they're doing. And so I love that. I love writing too, but I would take people's work and direct it because I love to see the unfolding of that craft. And then I sit and watch the audience, how they get involved. Like if this thing is happening for real. And that really makes me feel good. That I know that I have achieved. If we, excuse me, if people can sit there and abuse people on stage and get vexed with them and hate them, then I know that we did bring true craft to the theater. And for me, that is my bestest thing.
I'm gonna.
I have loved acting, but I'll tell you why I don't like acting anymore.
Oh,
Not that I wouldn't act. I've done so many roles, but acting was more work for less money. Now I'm doing less work for more money. Yeah, what can I say?
if you can do this quickly, who are some of your biggest influences in acting?
Anthony Stewart, when I started acting, the first person who really impressed me was a guy called Anthony Stewart. I don't know if you remember Anthony. Anthony Stewart was one of our better actors at the time. I had to perform with him at the Theatre Guild in a show called Juno and the Pay Cop. That was my first performance at the Theatre Guild, of which I won an award. So I wanted to know how great I am. And I loved Anthony Stewart because he lived every role. He used to be in the mirror in the annex at the Theatre Guild every day, looking at himself when he's doing his part. So he knows what he looks like when he goes on stage. He would go and study a mad woman by Board Market if he got to play a madman or a madman, and study that person, then go in front of that mirror and ensure he portrays that mad person that he saw on the road. That was big for me. And he was one of my greatest influences when I started theater in Guyana. Anthony Stewart, fantastic actor, loved the craft, was the best in it.
So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions now.
Okay.
When are you most happy?
I'm most happy. I can't tell you that.
Okay.
This is too X-rated for me to tell you when I'm most happy.
Okay.
Most happy when I'm being loved.
Okay. What is gratifying about being Desiree Edghill?
Because I can make a difference in the lives of so many. Because so many people can say, oh, Desiree, if it wasn't for you, I don't know where I'd be. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, we love you. That is gratifying for me, seeing other people happy.
If you could go back in time, what would you tell the 16-year-old Desiree?
I would tell a 16-year-old that you can have sex for the rest of your life. And so while you're 16, enjoy the finer things of teenage years. Playing, having fun, getting an education. Wait for that right person.
Name 3 things you cannot live without.
I cannot live without breath. I cannot live without water. And I cannot live without loving.
I like that, Desiree. Time is upon us, so I'm not going to challenge you on that. Can you tell us what challenge you overcame that you're most proud?
I am most proud because I was able to forgive my biological mother for leaving me when I was just 6 years old, and my sister when she was just 5 months, and never until she died explained to me why she did it.
Do you have any new projects in the works?
Oh yes, I'm working on a production called Mouth Open Story Jump Out.
Oh,
It's dealing with social issues because that's what I do.
yes.
So I don't think we have any production in Ghana that is doing that at the moment, and so that is something that I want to do. I want to deal with teenage pregnancy. I want to deal with domestic violence. I want to deal with infidelity in relationships. I want to deal with abuse against men. And so I'm doing a production called Mouth Open Story Jump Out. It's only when you open your mouth that people can know your story that you can get help.
Very true. Finish this sentence. I look forward to Sunday evenings to.
Sing karaoke at Cody's.
What are you most thankful for?
I am most thankful that I was given the opportunity to live a new life. To live a new life when Andre was ill in Christ, a spiritual life.
I have this hypothetical for you. You've had a tiring week, and I should say tiring and stressful week, and it is Saturday, and all your chores are done. You find a place, your favorite spot, and sit down to read, and listen to some music. Sip your favorite drink. Perhaps a few finger foods are nearby. What will you be reading? What will you be drinking? And what music will you be listening to? And if you're up to it, you can tell us what are some of those finger foods.
So I'll be listening to Sade. I'll be drinking red wine. The
Hmm.
book that I'll be reading is 50 Shades of Grey. And I'll be having some cheese straws, some stuffed eggs, and fish balls.
Ah, and the last question, which I ask all my guests, what makes you laugh out loud? Desiree, you're not supposed to make me laugh.
I know. Cyber copulating.
But you laugh, so you know what I mean?
I, look, my imagination, my
Running wild,
imagination is
right?
free, right? I never put restrictions on my imagination. It is my expression of my imagination I put restrictions on. So that's why I laugh. But perhaps you want to tell us?
What is cyber copulating? Cyber copulating is equal to phone sex.
Oh, I see.
You
Okay.
just you type it.
And
We say vivid imagination erotica, sensitive fingers.
that is what makes you laugh out loud.
It makes me laugh out loud because sometimes you're surprised at the things that you type.
Desiree, I know I asked you the last question, but if you were given a second chance at a career, what would you want to do?
I would want to be an actress. I didn't know that I wanted to be an actress until I became an actress. But this was kind of like trust on me. I didn't plan to become an actress, but
Hmm.
I'd want to. I'd want to become an actress, but I'd want to do it at a younger age than when I started this time around.
I understand.
Yeah.
Desiree, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It is always a pleasure, Selwyn. I really enjoy talking with you.
And what I enjoy most is, your reaction. You're really truly a woman of CWS. You know, to you're making me laugh. To come on at a moment's notice. I was really really touched by that. Really really touched by that. And you're a true sister. You're a true gem of our soil. Keep up the fight, Desiree. Keep
Oh,
up the fight. You may not realize it, but you are a beacon. You're a beacon of light to many of our young people, and many of those who feel that they can't or feel that they have been left behind or forgotten. You give people hope in your fight. You remind us that it is so very important to not only think about ourselves, but to think about others and what we can give and to give without expectation.
yes.
This, my sister, is one of the greatest gifts that any one of us can give to anybody, and you do it so flawlessly, so easily. I apologize for the glitches we had in the beginning of the program, but
Had a wonderful ending.
yeah, exactly. But you and I both know that everything happens for a reason, and
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
I I have a tendency to embrace the good in everything. I
Yeah.
always look for silver linings. But is there anything you would like to add before we close?
I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. I mean, I do a lot of sharing. This is what I do best. I'm always on an interview or something, but I think what you do for me is give me the opportunity to share with a wider cross section of our Guyanese people because I do Guyana, but you help me to do wider than Guyana, and I'm really grateful for that. I also want to say that excuse me, I might come on your program and ask the people in the US who are Guyanese to see if they too can come on board and help us to continue this fight against HIV and AIDS. But of course, that's another program. But keep up this wonderful program. I really love it. I always get upset when we get power outage and I can't get to listen or tune in or to make a contribution. It really upsets me, and I really prayed about it this midday, and hopefully that we don't, excuse me, get any power outage this evening. And thank God we didn't. But Selvin, do keep up the good work and do keep
Thank you.
showcasing all these wonderful women and men, talented women and men that you do showcase on your program. You really have a fantastic program.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Thank you. It is really indeed a pleasure. And believe you me, I do admire and look up to you. I have lots of respect and admiration for you. And I'm hoping one day I get a chance to see one of your plays. I really am hoping.
Yeah, you will. They said to mountain don't meet, but
Well,
you will get
Desiree,
the opportunity.
you're welcome. Good night.
Good night, someone.
All
Good
right.
night to the listeners and viewers as well.
All right. Bye bye.